I live in Massachusetts. There's a location out here called the Belchertown State School for the Feeble-Minded. It's got a very dark history, with lots of ill treatment on patients, including children, and suicides. It was shut down for good in 1992. It was mostly demolished in 2016 into 2017, but before that, I spent about a year going there on a weekly basis, usually on Fridays. I began with a few friends, then, over time, I would go there alone. I spent a lot of time on those grounds to the point that I knew every part of it inside and out. I even become something of a legend because I wore a mask when exploring, so if people ran into me, they would recognise me from the stories. But there were many nights I had the whole grounds to myself. Paranormal activity was rampant. I have some crazy stories. The most obvious and frequent one was noises. There were things here that happened that I could explain, and some that I just couldn't. One of those was Door X. There was this one door in the hospital. It was on the 3rd floor, right wing, second door into the floor to the left. It was beside what was once a bathroom. This door led to a hall containing several empty rooms. I could not determine what these rooms might have been. They didn't look like cells, more like storage or office spaces. This door was heavy. It took some effort to move. I'm a pretty stocky dude, and I'm 6 foot, and I had to lean into this door to open it. I call it X door because it was the only door in the whole facility marked with X. I don't know why. Now this door was a highlight of a lot of my trips there, as well as when I went with other groups. Because we would close the door, walk away, come back later to find it open. It was creepy because of how heavy the door was. Now I tried when I was alone to watch the door, but nothing there happened. I tried to replicate potential causes, but there was zero. There was no airflow in this wing due to heavy doors on all sides, and honestly, even if an animal ran into it, it wouldn't be strong enough to move it whatsoever. I can never explain the X door, but I was always sure to visit it when I went with groups, and every time we left it open, we'd go back to find it shut. Another experience was one time I was bringing 2 of my friends out there. It was the first time on the grounds with them. We made it and passed the fence and outside of the asylum. They didn't want to go in. They were getting truly spooked. I encouraged them to try it. It had some cool stuff and all. And then, all 3 of us at the exact same time heard what sounded like screaming, laughter, and talking all at the same time. I heard more laughter, but my friends say it was screaming, and more prominent. Now it could have easily been another group inside the hospital, but here's the thing. I've been on the grounds when another group is talking or laughing or screaming inside. You can pinpoint exactly where it goes down. Lots of broken windows and open walls, so it's pretty damn easy to look down and see where they were. But this sound come from the building. That's the only way I can explain it, like the whole building let out a terrible sound at once. Now I'm a gusty bloke, but I got chills too. I left. My friends were begging to flee too. I wish I could have stayed that night. The activity was just real, I could feel it. I had lots of other experiences in there too. The X room, the padded cell, the silent room, the gym. It's just a shame that they knocked it down because I'd love to be able to go back there and experience more.
Alright, so I found this subreddit a few days ago and have been reading everything that's posted every day, so I have decided to post my story. I've only talked about this with my parents and my now wife, so here it goes. A couple of years before I was born, my parents bought a mobile home. It was winter time, so they didn't move in until the spring. The trailer was placed on my grandfather's land, about 300 feet from his house. There was no power in the trailer or anything, and the first instance of strange activity happening was when my grandfather called my parents late one night and said there was a light left on in the trailer. My parents told him there was no power in it, so there couldn't possibly be a light on, and as my grandfather was watching it, it just went off. Fast forward a couple of months and my parents move in. When they bought the home, there was a big red stain in the carpet in the corner of the living room, and they decided to have a carpet cleaner come later to get rid of it. The lady comes to clean the carpet and isn't able to get the stain out. She leaves and comes back with some kind of liquid and says this liquid will get any stains out unless it's blood. Of course the stain doesn't come out, so my dad pulls back the carpet and there's an even bigger blood stain in the board flooring under the carpet. The carpet cleaner freaks out and leaves, so my parents decide to get a new carpet. Sometime after that, my mother is sleeping one night and she has a dream of the trailer they just bought. She says she dreamed one night there was a little boy, maybe 4 or 5, and his father is home. Some people force open the back door and come in and murder them. The boy is in the corner where the bloodstain is, and the father is in the back bedroom where my parents sleep. She woke up the next morning and told my dad about her dream. Later that day he goes outside to do some yard work. When he's coming back in, he decides to come in through the back door. He opens it and immediately notices an aluminium frame that is pulled back like someone had pulled it back with a crowbar. After that they started having typical experiences, like toilets flushing and water turning off and on. One night they were sitting in the living room and the same back door flew open and smacked the side of the home. There was no wind of any kind or bad weather. Another night their phone speaker came on and started dialing a number. It rang maybe twice before my dad ran and turned it off. He says he was afraid they were dialing a long distance number and he didn't want the charges. He regrets that to this day because they could have gotten some answers. More stuff happens, like them feeling someone sitting on their feet whilst they're in bed. When I was born they said everything kind of died down. Either that or they just didn't notice anything since they were busy with me. Then it started back up when I was around 2 or 3. I can vaguely remember laying in my bed and hearing people talking in the living room and rattling dishes in the kitchen. What I don't remember is my parents said one night I started screaming, and after that I wouldn't sleep in my room until I was about 5. During that time my dad got tired of sleeping in the bed with me, so he started sleeping in my room while I slept with my mum. One night he came and woke us up and said he was almost asleep when he heard my toy box rattling. He raised up and saw a small boy going through my toys. The boy picked up a stuffed rabbit and started walking towards the door, and my dad said my name and the boy looked at him and vanished, dropping the rabbit. He says the boy had an aura around him and looked sad. Nothing happens for a couple of years until I'm about 10 years old. Then I started seeing the man. Not an actual man, but like the shadow of a man. I always saw him coming out of my parents' bedroom and going into the bathroom every single time. He seemed harmless, so I wasn't scared. Same shadow man for a couple of years, and then my sister has a child when I'm 15. She was still a teen, and so they lived with us for a couple of years. My nephew was 3 or 4, and he started talking about his friend that he just called Little Boy. He and Little Boy would play all the time, he said. Eventually he got talking about the boy so much, my dad got to asking him about the boy and what he looked like. My nephew said the boy wouldn't talk to him, they just played all the time. When asked what he looked like, my nephew said, "He looks like me, but he's always sad." It was a somewhat confirmation of what my dad suspected. It was more likely the child my dad saw. He doesn't play with the little boy anymore when he goes to visit. I moved out 2 years ago, and my parents say they haven't heard or seen anything since. They joke that they left with me. I just hope they were finally able to move on. I forgot to mention this earlier, but when everything started happening, my mum called the lot they got the trailer from, asking about previous owners. They said there would have been papers in one of the cabinets with all the information, but it was never found. They knew the trailer we had because they mentioned that there had been strange occurrences in it, but as I said before, I just hope they moved on. It would be nice to know who they were and what happened for sure, but some things are better left unknown, I guess. Anyway, that's my story.
No, there's a weird ghost thing that my family's seen throughout the decades. It's truly terrifying to me. I hope it stops. We're from rural Ireland. When my father was younger, he was walking home late at night and saw a white goat-like creature with a woman's head and long hair. It had arms sticking out of its head. It nearly gave him a heart attack but didn't do anything. Several years later, my uncle, who's on my mother's side, not father's, was walking back to his parents' house, which is in the middle of nowhere in Ireland through fields. His neighbour had a puckin. This is an Irish word for a male goat. He thought that he saw the goat caught up in barbed wire, so decided to go and check on it. He said the thing looked up at him with a woman's face and smiled at him. When he went to free it, he ran home to my mother. She said he genuinely looked as if he was about to die from fear. Just last night, my 12-year-old cousin texted her dad to tell him to come out and get her because there's something screaming outside of her window and she was too afraid to move. Assuming it's just a fox, he went to the window to check it out and he saw a creature that looked like a goat body with a woman's head, and the thing looked up and bolted. Here's the thing, my uncle and grandmother live in the same lane. My mother's family grew up at the bottom of it, and then my mother's brother built a house on it to be close to her. The whole family maintain the land and know that it's haunted, because it used to be a route for headless hunt. My grandmother saw something on the lane that she refuses to speak about too. I wonder if it's the same thing. A couple of months ago, I was walking home late at night, down the same street as usual, when I saw on the floor what appeared to be a shadow of a man walking behind me. It wasn't my shadow because I had a bag. I couldn't hear anybody behind me though. This continued for a few more seconds nearing the place I was going to cross the road, when I felt the supposed man behind me tug at my coat. I turned around, and no one was there at all. Now the entire street was empty. There was nobody near me. This caused me to stand in shock for a few seconds before I crossed the road, only to see a van speeding past. If I hadn't been slowed down by the shadow man, I would have walked straight out in front of it, completely oblivious to it.
This is my experience with a haunted indoor playground. I'm from a town in Canada, outside of a major city. My friend was working at an indoor playground for kids, and invited me over one night to chill with her when we were the only ones in there. I come over and it's kind of spooky, as it's just two teenagers in this vast and quiet open space at night, usually populated by kids. But she's finishing her duties for the night, cleaning and whatever, and I'm just having a blast by myself as she worked. No, we weren't drinking. We were planning on drinking a bit later on and playing in the playground after, but she was just finishing up her duties for the night before we would do any of that. Eventually, she was almost done, and we started jumping on the trampoline together. No drinks in our system at all. We're jumping and talking, when all of a sudden we both stop and look at each other. Something in the air felt different, like a change in the atmosphere. We both felt the hair on the back of our necks stand up at the same time. As we both stopped jumping and looked around, I kid you not, all the lights turned off at once, to the entire vast open playroom. The lights were on in the entire place, then it just turned to darkness all at once. This was terrifying. Then all the little games that my friend had unplugged earlier turned on and started making noise. I had seen her unplug them. Yet this little merry-go-round in the corner was lighting up and going in circles. I heard other little games making noises as well. And then we heard what terrified me the most. We heard a little girl's laughter. We both heard the little girl's laugh. Neither of us even looked at each other. We both bolted for our lives towards the door. I remember screaming, "What the hell? Hell no! What the hell is this?" I also vividly remember hurdling the little kiddie's fence at the front, not to waste time opening it, as I needed to get the hell out of there. And bear in mind, I'm not an athlete whatsoever. I'm at the entrance door and my friend says, "Wait, I have to lock up." And to do that, she needs to let me out, lock the front door, and walk back across the entire building to go out to the back door and lock that one. So she lets me out the front, and I'm waiting near our cars in the parking lot for her to come out around the back. I'm waiting in my car trying to calm down when she knocks on my window. She said she ran across the whole place in the dark, and tried to use a flashlight on her phone for the light, but her phone wouldn't turn on. But then, it turned on when she was talking to me outside the place. Instead of drinking and spending that night in the playground, as we were going to do, we drive to her house and have a sleepover, to comfort each other as well as process what happened. This was 2 years ago, but we both still remember it like this. The fact that we both heard the same thing, I don't like it. Never ever gonna go back there again. But my friend did, as she kept working there for like 6 months after it happened. Some background to the place, she told me after this happened, is that they would have a bunch of maintenance guys or plumbers come over at night and would be working alone. Yet all of them reported the same thing. They felt like there was someone watching them, and they all heard footsteps around the place when they were the only ones in there. Other thing my friend told me what happened, that in this one padded area kids kept getting hurt, Like they would get cut or scratched when it was all padded. And it's for kids. My friend says she drove herself mad trying to find out what in that area could hurt multiple kids. She scoured the whole area and it's entirely padded. Yet a few kids different times would get scratches. That freaks me out, kids getting hurt. Forget that. My friend also said she had other friends over to play at night like she invited me. They also have stories but I don't know the details. All I know is the place is definitely haunted.
I hold this story responsible for my continuing fascination with the unsolved and unexplainable. It has become a part of the culture in our family. Growing up, I recall many family get-togethers going late into the night, retelling different accounts, discussing possibilities. Since then, I've carried on the tradition myself. Now as well, I tell it to my friends. It's a story that's meant to be told at night, a standing story. At least, my father and I can never sit while telling it. I'll never know what really happened that night, nor will my father, my grandmother, or anyone in Wall Township, NJ for the matter. It's been over 2 decades now. I feel a desire, a responsibility even, to write it and share this story with the hopes that others will appreciate it as my family do. Now, I wasn't born yet. It's the summer of 1987 in Walship Township, NJ. My father's high school graduation night. He is out with friends celebrating. At home is my grandma and her young daughter Jan. They live on a corner lot in a small ranch in a quiet suburban neighbourhood along with their dog, Brandy, who was outside in a backyard pen that is located on the right side of the home. My grandma decides to drop something off at a friend's house just a few minutes away. She leaves Jen at the house for a short time. While alone, Jen is in her room on the left side of the house. This is when the first strange occurrence happens. There's crunching of the leaves outside her bedroom window. She knows Brandy's in her pen and that no animal could be out there. Now this is distinctly a person's slow and deliberate footsteps. Right there, under her window, cautious footsteps trying not to be heard. Jen doesn't dare look out of her window for fear of what could be out there. Instead, she hides and waits for the sound to stop. It eventually does. It doesn't just trail off. It just stops. Somebody's still there. Who could that be? My grandma comes home and Jen is obviously frightened. She tells my grandma what happened. I consider my grandma to be a brave lady. She checks throughout the house and then she looks out the window. Nothing. Not too much cause for concern. It could have been anything. Time for dishes, so now my grandma is washing dishes in the kitchen, which is on the left side of the home. There's a window directly above the sink. Everything has turned quiet now. The sun is still lingering, as it tends to do during the summer. Over the sound of the water running, my grandma hears something that she still can't explain to this day. A heavy, raspy heaving. It sounds like it's coming from below the window outside. Imagine a long-term smoker gasping for air, a deep and yet frightening sound. 2 and 2 are put together. There's been somebody outside for quite some time now. There was someone there while she was away at the store, and that somebody must have been there when she comes to check around the home. Someone she didn't see. A fear sets in, and before this sound can stop, Brandy, whose pen is about 30 feet away from the kitchen window, goes crazy, barking like she's never barked before. Now, like I said, my grandma is a brave lady. She decides to go get Brandy. She avoids Jen to lock the door after she steps outside, and for Jen only to open it when she sees her mother return, running up the stairs where Brandy is. So, on the count of 3, she makes a run for it. Jen locks the door and waits for what seems like an eternity. Around the corner comes my grandma with Brandy bolting up the steps. The second that she's let them in, she slams the door behind them and locks it, without missing a beat. The 3 of them retreat to my grandma's bedroom, which is located on the back side of the home. Before my grandma even has a chance to gather her thoughts or call someone, there's a voice coming from the side street of her bedroom window. A relief rushes over both of them as they realise that their familiar voices, my father and his high school buddies, Jeff, Drew, Mark and Chuck. So 5 or 6 of them are all crammed in a small Volkswagen laughing and joking, obviously drinking and having a good time. This is right under my mother's nose. However, the voices quickly turn to panicking and shouting. Oh my god, what is that? There's 4 of them. Now after a couple of minutes of shouting, it's directed from the sky to the left side of the home, the front left outside Jen's bedroom. Clearly it's something much more frightening than what they'd seen in the sky. As their shouting gets louder and more panicked, somebody yelled, "Let's get the hell out of here," and with that, the car bolts forward. They get out of there. My grandma stands frozen at the window watching them as they grow further and further away from the home. Whatever they saw, it must have been truly horrifying. Then, maybe even more unexpectedly, she saw their red braking lights in the distance. The car had stopped, but for what? It was a road surrounded by woods on both sides. Why would they stop in the wooded area after being scared? It was then that she realised they were making a U-turn, heading back towards the home. In a desperate attempt to signal the boys to pull into the driveway and come into the home, my grandma runs to the front door and begins to flicker the outside light switch on and off. The car is speeding so quick at this point that she worries they'll miss the signal, but at the last second, the car makes a quick turn into the driveway, doors fly open, and 6 boys emerge in a massive sprint across the lawn. All 6 of them reaching the front door at the very same moment, climbing under and over and all around my grandma, and then somebody pulls her inside along with them. The door slams shut, locked and bolted, all of them out of breath and shaken to the core, each one telling the story, the same thing. Above the power lines, there's a ball of light. It was spinning very fast. The ball turned yellow, then red hot, then it split into 2 balls, then 4, then the bottom right one spins until red again, until the 4 of them join back into 1. They weren't sure how long they watched this pattern go on for. It was so surreal to them. Then they saw a figure leaning against the home. Mark chinned in, and from all of their accounts, something was very not right with this figure. Imagine a silhouette of a man, not darkened beneath the shadows of the night. No, this figure was bright white, all white, head to toe. Was the man's skin white, or was he wearing clothing that covered his face like a hood? They couldn't quite tell. They said it seemed like he was standing there leaning against the wall very casually, almost as if observing their reactions of the globes above them. "That's when I told him to floor it," said Jeff. Then we're coming back towards the home, and we'd see the lights flashing. We thought the lights in the sky were making the electricity flicker in the house. Then somebody yells, "It's your mum." They then realised that my grandma was flicking the lights to get their attention. They knew they couldn't just leave her, and my aunt was there alone. So they stormed into the home. They were so panicked that they didn't even bother looking outside to see if everything was still going on. The story ends there anticlimactically. My grandma told the boys that they could party as much as they wanted in the basement, and she cooked them a big lasagna dinner as long as they promised not to leave the home. But first, she calls the police and tells them about the crunching and rasping sounds and the dog barking. She doesn't want to tell him the other details because she doesn't want to be questioned, especially because the boys had been underage drinking. So 2 police cars pull into the driveway. The boys sit there quietly out of sight while my grandma calls the police. Then, there's a knock on the front door. It's one of the policemen. They said, "We searched the entire yard, around the home, in and around the shed, along the row of trees and bushes outside the perimeter. We don't see anything, but if you hear anything further, just give us a call back." Like I said, we're never going to know exactly what happened that night, but the story spread quickly and became kind of a legend in the town. Years later, when I was little, my dad and I were watching a show on UFO sightings together. They showed a film somebody had taken of UFOs, spinning balls of light in the sky. My father jumped and yelled, "That's it, that's what I saw." And this tape was in another city. I don't recall where, perhaps it was even not in our country. I could see that there was much fear in my father when he jumped up too though. All I can say is the man in the white silhouette glowing, spinning balls of light in the sky, visited my family's house in 1987, and it continues to both intrigue and scare us all even to this day.
When I was living in Australia for a year, I was once in a passenger carrier travelling through towns to get to the next destination I was heading to. We were passing through rural towns in NSW that was small but still well populated, but we weren't out in the middle of nowhere. We passed by a field, parks where families are having picnics, enjoying the day, kids are running around and playing, etc. While I'm looking at the park and all the people in it with my head on the window, I all of a sudden see what looks like a grey zombie walking through the park. It's walking right by families and people sitting down, but no one seems to take notice of this thing that is sticking out like a sore thumb. No one is looking up at what I assume is a freak in a Halloween costume when it's not Halloween. It's moving slow and limping like a zombie would, but has a dead look in its eyes and its skin is grey. If my memory serves me correctly, even its clothes are grey. It's wearing tattered clothes and has a Frankenstein monster kind of air about it. That's the best way I can describe it, like a grey zombie Frankenstein monster. My eyes follow it the entire time while my bus passes the park, which is only for a moment, but the thing that freaks me out the most is how it's passing by all these families and no one is paying attention to it. The thing is, it didn't necessarily seem evil to me, just sad. It didn't make eye contact with me, it was just walking slowly and sadly through the park. This huge grey guy is dressed up as Frankenstein's monster, painted grey on a sunny day, and nobody had taken notice of him, even when he walked right in front of them. I don't know what to make of it. A very short 10-second psychosis on my part. Something supernatural maybe. I posted here as I wanted to see if anyone has any info on Aussie's legends that resemble what I saw that day, or if anyone else has had a similar experience to this, because I can't explain this strange humanoid or paranormal thing, and I can't find any stories similar to this encounter.
When I was 16, I would jump on my trampoline out the back for hours every night. I mean literally hours. I would just listen to my iPod and daydream to get away from a rough family life. So one night when I was jumping, a kid ran past our fence full speed carrying a box about the size and shape of a skateboard. He ran to the park behind my home and held it by the edge and then tossed it into the air. It flipped a few times before landing on the floor. At that point, I was a little weirded out. He was just standing over it staring at it. Then, out of the blue, he bolts out of there past our fence like I didn't even notice he was there. Alright, that's a bit weird. I just kept on jumping and staring at the box. Here's where it gets creepy. The box looked like it is moving. Then, something started to appear out of it. I actually stopped jumping and rubbed my eyes and watched as what appeared to be a full-grown man rose out of the box. He had an elongated head with no hair, his skin was dark orange, and his eyes were huge and pitch black. He then raised one arm up to his side, and the box kind of just went into what I can only describe as a trench coat. He walked over to the pavilion we have at the small park, grabbed on the metal beam holding up to the overhang, then he literally just started hitting his head on it over and over again. I kept rubbing my eyes and I couldn't move. I had no idea what I was seeing. It couldn't have been real. Then, without warning, he just stopped, and his head quickly whipped around and stared right at me. It was like he could feel me watching him. A giant, and I mean a giant smile come across his face, and those dark eyes just stared at me. This couldn't be real. I kept shaking my head and trying to clear my vision, but it was. He tilted his head back and forth a few more times. I had goosebumps and my eyes started to tear up. Even typing this, I'm starting to tear up a little bit and looking around me. I just started crying, sure that I was hallucinating but worrying now. He then gone off down a trail and slowly disappeared, almost leaving a trail behind him. That was it. I bawled my eyes out and sprinted inside and called my best friend, who assured me that I was seeing things and I needed to calm down. I sound so insane and nobody will believe me, but I know this happened and it's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. To this day, I have no idea what the hell this is. It really scares me though, because I've never had hallucinations before, have no mental illness running in my family and nothing wrong with me. I just prayed this was all in my head. But something about it just feels too real to me. When I was in my early 20s, I accepted a job as a visitor service manager at a medium-sized historic house museum. The house was a Victorian Gothic cottage of an author who wrote a single and rather important book. Anyway, the home was beautiful, but dark and obsessive in a creepy manner that only Victorian homes can be. It sat near the street with two other buildings, a carriage house and another mansion behind. All belonged to my non-profit employer. My office was tucked in the front corner of the ground floor of the carriage house. In the daytime, it was filled with sunlight, but during the night time, it was dark and gloomy, and the position of the desk put my back towards the expanse of the quite empty 100-year-old building. On the best of days it is eerie, on the worst it is terrifying. Now it's been an exceptionally long and boring day, as most were, working at an ill-attended museum. All told, I think we'd sent a total of 1 tour with 1 visit for the day. I spent most of the day staring, longing at pictures of Robert Pattinson on the computer behind the front desk. As I said, this was a while ago, my tastes have improved. Now this was at the time before that the clocks went forward, so it was very dark, and it began drizzling a little bit, and it was very ambient. Now seated at the front of the gift shop, I sent my 2 remaining tour guides in to close the house for the night, which involved turning off all the lights, switching others on, shutting some doors and opening yet others. So the 2 tour guides were in the home and I was stationed at the front desk on the main floor of the 1872 carriage house. Directly above me was a lofty attic space used as merchandise and junk storage of the types of museums seemed to accumulate. Now above me to the right was a guide break room with crappy folding tables and chairs, microwaves and multiple boxes and crates of books, educational material and related stuff. Downstairs in the gift shop, on my desk was an old handset landline phone that we could dial if we needed. With the press of a button, labelled guide room, we could reach a room above on speakerphone. This meant that I could announce a pending tour or something like that. So I was just finishing up considering what colour Robert Pattinson's eye might be in candlelight when I started to hear the most considerable racket coming from the guide break room. It sounded like a person of considerable girth lifting heavy objects, carrying them to the other side of the room, and then dumping them sporadically and stomping the entire time. This continued for perhaps 30 seconds, and I recall the thought that drifted throughout my mind in the confusion. That sounds urgent, as if a person was doing whatever they were as fast as possible. Anyway, I was angry. No one should be up there. I called up on the speakerphone and said something like, "What the hell are you doing?" No one answered, so I went with the classical, "Hello? Hello?" And then my voice died in my throat as I listened. I could now hear breathing, and breathing hard, and moving things on the desk, papers, maybe even phone base. It was at that moment that I realised that not only had I seen both my tour guides leave to close the adjacent house, confirming that I was alone, but I could see that all the doors were unlocked from my seat, and nobody had come in since their departure. The hairs on my arms stood up, and I immediately radioed our aged by a well-meaning security guard who happened to be standing just outside of the front door of the carriage house. He went straight upstairs upon my call. I watched him march up the first set of stairs, then listened. He then turned immediately at the landing and walked up the last handful slowly. I held my breath waiting for him to open the door, and then I heard no more sounds. "Mark, who's up there? Mark?" There was no one. He come back down the stairs looking at me a bit owlishly. As I said, somebody was up there. There had to be. Now the room had been empty, nothing had been touched, save a pile of freshly crumpled papers in the centre of the table. At this point my guides, hearing the ruckus on the radio, returned to the home. They showed up and decided to check, and nothing else had been amiss. and they were certain they hadn't crumpled the paper. Since they'd been there, there'd been a neat stack of new paper in the centre table. It was only different when they returned to see what the ruckus was about. Now I won't lie, I was shaken up by it. I know for a fact that nobody was in there. What makes it more scary is apparently a worker in the 19th century hung himself in there.
My great-grandmother lived to 97. She was very religious. Catholic, I think. She didn't believe in ghosts or any paranormal entities whatsoever. About 10ish years before she passed, I think I was around 8, she moved out of her home that she lived in for most of her life to live in a nursing home. She had refused for over 10 years to go to the nursing home, absolutely refusing to ever leave the house. So one day when her husband was at work, she called him from home. She told him that when she was heading down into the basement, she saw a black figure standing at the bottom of the stairs. She demanded that he come home and pick her up right away. He left work, and when he got home, she was waiting outside on the sidewalk. She never stepped foot in that house again. My family had to help them move out. What I find even more messed up is that my family told me none of this. We then moved into that house. We were having a new home built, but needed a place to live for about 8 months until it was done. My brother and I played video games in the basement every day, and it just felt creepy. I love my video games, but I would not go down there without someone to accompany me. I could never shake the feeling that I was being watched. There was a second family-in-law down there too, and sometimes we would go in there, but it just felt wrong for some reason. You can imagine my surprise when I heard about all this years later.
When I was in high school, the days before cell phones were common, my friends had come over to pick me up from my home one night. We had made plans at school for them to pick me up at 7 PM. At 6, my parents said I had to come home to do something. I totally forgot to call my friends and tell them. They come to my house at 7 PM and called the house phone. No one answered. There was 4 of them in the car. They all told us the exact same story. They said that they were about to pull out of my driveway, but they saw somebody peeking through the blinds from my bedroom on the top floor to the right. That was my bedroom. So they assumed it is me messing around. 5 more times they said that somebody would peek through the blinds. A couple of them saw the person's eyes. We got home at probably 7:10 to 7:15, and they're still on our driveway. One of my friends come over and said that they thought I was messing with them. They asked me, "So who's staying in your room?" I told them no one. They asked me, Who's at your house right now?" Again, I told them no one. At first, we all thought a robber was in my home, so we called the cops. They come over and inspected my home. There was 0 signs of a break-in. Nothing was moved or even touched. Nothing was stolen. Our house alarm hadn't went off. There was literally no way that anybody could have been in there. My friends and family and cops all kind of stood around for a few minutes trying to make sense of the situation. All 4 of them saw the same thing, and none of us can make sense of that situation. So the house that I'm currently at, we've had some strange occurrences happening. Our beds would shake like a mini earthquake, and my dad said that he saw a predator camouflage outline in the trees, watching us while checking what my dog was barking at. And we've even had them visit us during the night. This is what happened most recently. My sister used to crash in our living room when visiting from school. At this time, I was unemployed and stayed up until about 4 AM just playing video games. So one night I heard a loud gurgling sound and I went to check it out. And my dog was there, and my sister was in tears. She looked at me and points to flick the light on. I switched it on, and she sits up gasping for air. I asked her what was wrong, and she didn't say anything. She then finally asked if she could sleep in my bed, and I let her. I preferred having the larger living room to myself. I never really knew what was wrong or what happened. A few months later, I took a nap on the same couch at around 7, but woke up somewhere around 10 minutes later to see 2 glowing circles, eyes, red around the edges, yellow in the middle staring at me, and then started to feel something pulling at me. I'm not even able to scream for help when I'm alone. My right arm was lifted slightly like it has been pulled off the ground. I'm really struggling to breathe now, trying desperately to make my way to the light. I'm using my phone screen to try and navigate. My sister runs over, sees me and tears up and screams stop at the top of her lungs. I could finally breathe. Now we haven't slept in that room since, but I'm interested to know what the hell happened to us.